Hello and welcome to D&D 101. So far we have covered what is D&D, what's a character sheet, what's our skill checks. So this session I thought we would cover what it is about a character, mostly focusing at your classes and your races. So I've talked briefly about the player's handbook, but there are additional books that you can acquire for more character building options, such as Xanathar's Guide to Everything and Volo's Guide to Monsters. Volo's Guide to Monsters extends the races that you have as an option. I really don't like that they're called races. They really should be called species, because they are all different actual species. But that's neither here or there. Xanathar's Guide extends the classes that are available to you. So let's just look for now at the player's handbook. So in this great book, there are the core starting species, as we're going to call them. So you've got your dwarf, your elf, your human, dragonborn, gnome, half elf, half orc, halfling, which is basically your hobbit, and your tiefling. Yeah, that's it. What are they? What's their purpose? How do they interact with each other? Well, your dwarf is your classic dwarf from any of the fantasy settings. They are miners, they are great fighters, they are proud of their stonework and masonry. They don't typically get on with elves. Your elves have various kinds. You've got your high elves, who are basically your political princes, kings, so on and so forth, the royalty. You have your wood elves, who are based in forest. You've got sea elves, who live in the sea. They all are nature-based, proud creatures who believe in their own superiority, but they do occasionally mingle with other races, especially those, like the wood elves will mingle with gnomes and other forest-based creatures. Your halfling is your hobbit. They like a simple life, they are stout, and interestingly enough, they are actually the shortest of the races. So that's something interesting. Your human is your all-around flexible character. They can pretty much be anything and everything. Your dragonborn is half dragon, half human. How that happens is a question for another time. But essentially, as a dragonborn ages, they gain more dragon-like features. One of the core things that they have as a default is they can breathe a dragon breath. Dragons come in many colours, and those colours determine the kind of breath that they produce. So it's not all just fire, it can be ice, poison, electricity. So it's pretty cool. Your gnome is a typical forest creature, however there is a version of it called the deep gnome. Deep gnomes live in the Underdark, which is basically like a sub-world where these creatures tend to be a bit more evil. Actually, going back to dwarves, they have the Dugar, who are also from the Underdark and are an evil race. Dugar, however, can change their shape. They are shape-shifting in that essence. They can become giant, towering at a whopping 15 foot when they go giant. You have your half-elf, which obviously has been bred by a human breeding with an elf. They gain some of the benefits of a human, some of the benefits of an elf, so they're not as focused as an elf can be, and they don't have the full variety of a human. You have your half-orc, a human breeding with an orc. These guys are your brutes. They're strong, they're typically a paladin, a fighter, a barbarian. And then finally your tiefling. Your tiefling is half of one race and half demon. They all tend to take a more human shape, but they tend to grow tails or horns or jagged teeth. They have something about them that points out that they're demonic. Also, their skin is never a normal skin colour. It's reds or purples or blues. It stands out. They always will stand out. because people know of this breeding with demons, obviously tieflings get a lot of punishment for it. Typically what happens with a tiefling is they either go down the route of being a paladin or a cleric to be like, I'm not a problem, I'm great, I'm good, or they go down the warlock path, which is where they've basically made a pact with a demon, typically their parent, and use their power to become spellcasters. So that's the base races. Let's quickly get into the base classes. I've briefly mentioned each of them. So you have your barbarian, which, you know, if anybody has any of the basics of any TV show, any book lore, you know that your barbarian is your big strong brute. They like to fight. They're not usually all that smart. However, I have seen some brilliant builds before in my life of hyper intelligent bards, like a sage who went down the road of being a barbarian. They just got so annoyed about always reading books that they decided they just wanted to go and fight. And they're very interesting because they're smart thinkers, which means they're smart fighters. So it adds something to it. However, your barbarian does have a rage ability, and that can be really punishing in a fight to the creatures that they're beating down on. Your bard is a supportive character. They tend to keep in the back. They play their music or sing or whatever way that they perform their bardic spells. All bardic spells are musically based, and they tend to be support based, so that you can cast like haste spells or slow. You can give people bardic inspiration, which gives them an additional dice that they can add to their rolls to change the value. So they're very good at making sure the team survives. They also have some healing spells, so that can be quite useful. Then there's your cleric. They are a holy person. They will follow a particular god and try and convert people to follow the religion, heal you through channeling that god's power. If they ever fall out of favour with the god, their power is gone, completely gone. So they have to keep faith with the god. They can't do something that that god wouldn't like, because that's instant punishment to them. They lose that power. There is a form of your cleric who is all about the dead, and their desire instead is to take the dead and bury them for their particular god. So that's quite an interesting version of it. You've got your druid, who is a magic user of nature. They believe that nature is the one true. You shouldn't do anything to hinder nature. You have to become one with nature, and they happen to have some of the coolest spells I've ever seen, because they can transform into animals and then embody that animal spirit to fight. That is such a cool feature. I love it. I love the shapeshifting idea to a druid. Next up is your fighter. So your fighter, it can be your Hercules, for example, because he's quite skilled with all kinds of different weapons. Your fighters are multi-weaponed users. They're skilled with all kinds of weapons. They're kind of a jack of all trades in combat. So they can be up close, or they could focus on being back. Your monk. Monks are great. They happen to be using very few weapons. They will use a staff, or they will just go full on fist. There is a drunken monk form in, I think it's in Xanathar's Guide, which is pretty interesting as well. But essentially they can pummel out a lot of attacks in a turn, because they can channel their chi, which can be used to give them extra attacks, or even just empower an attack. It's some really crazy stuff. Next up is your paladin. So your paladin is just a knight. They will be working for a king. Sometimes they are also a bit more religious focused, but they don't need to be. They're your tank, as we would deem in this kind of game. So they can take a lot of damage, and they can give a lot of damage. So that's the person that you want to basically be up front, pummeling in, but being ready to come back and heal up those that are needing healing. Your ranger, they basically spend their time out in the forest on the hunt. They are one with nature, so they will never hunt more than they need. They will always give a prayer of some kind when they have to take a kill for food. But they're great at range. Bow and arrow with a ranger is something that is just wonderful. They can in-tune those attacks with magic. So for example, one of their spells is called Hail of Thorns, which lets the arrow split out into a whole array of thorns that can hit a bunch of bad guys instead of just the one. Your rogue is typically a thief or some kind of criminal, a spy, or in my case you can actually be an archaeologist. They're dexterous, they're about sneaking around, dismantling traps or setting traps, picking locks, so they're great to get into places. Your sorcerer is a class which essentially magic is natural to them for one reason or another. Like for example, you can have dragon magic, which means that at some point in your bloodline a dragon did breed in with your bloodline, and now you can actually summon that power to cast your own spells. Eventually, as you level up, you will gain things like wings or claws to identify that. You've got wild magic, which is something I'm enjoying at the moment, which essentially just lets the magic just comes from the world around you, and as you explode with your spells, there's always this chance the very fabric of space and time is impacted by your spell, and weird stuff can happen, especially if you force the attack. So there's like a feature where you can essentially force it, roll for advantage, and in that case the DM gets to roll on a little table to see what on earth just happened. And that could be something like a fireball gets summoned and hits down and causes a lot of major damage to everybody within inside that area. My character nearly died from such an event. That was quite funny. And you've then got your warlock. I briefly talked about that. They have a pact with a demon to be able to cast. Now the interesting part with a demon pact, unlike a cleric, is it's a one-time thing. I make my pact with the demon, I will give them something, they give me magic, I then always have that magic. The demon can't cut that off from me. And so your final class is the wizard. The wizard spends a lot of time having to research magic, because magic isn't completely natural to them. They have a small amount, and the rest of it comes through their learning. So they are writing and maintaining a spell book, they have the spells in there, they have how to perform the spell, what words they need to do, what hand movements they do to cast it. But for them, one of the things that you have to be aware of is they have to prepare the spells that they're going to use for the day. So they may not know what's going to happen, but at the beginning of a session they must prepare spells to be able to use them. This also goes for druids, paladins, and clerics, I believe. Bards, rangers, and sorcerers and warlocks have all their spells available that they've learnt, but they don't have beyond that, whereas a wizard has a huge array beyond that, druids have a huge array beyond that. So yes, that is your classes and your races in D&D. I hope that's enlightened them. I will actually put some links down below on some other really cool videos on understanding the point of the different classes or the point of the different races. There's some really good other videos that can give you a little bit more, but that's just a rough feel for what you would want to do and how you would want to play those characters. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you all for watching. I'm surrounded by animals right now. Sorry for the distractions. And until next time, keep it geeky.
Keep it geeky.